Hello, Nino.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me, Noreen.
Welcome to Neutrino Whispers podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. And for people who don't know you, Nino is one of the coolest people that I've known. So, Nino is an artist. He is a spiritual artist and a life coach, embodiment life coach, who is also a poet. Did you say that you're
Yeah,
write poems? That was new. I didn't know that.
yeah. I think I ended up wearing many hats. It's always hard, the whole title thing, because I'm like, I don't know, artist of the spirit, life coach, breathwork, meditation guide. I write a lot of poetry. I write every day.
Wow.
It's hard to. I'm a multifaceted, multidimensional human being that just
Yeah.
can't be contained by one label.
That's what we like. So I got to know you from one of your breathwork workshops at Authorship.
Hmm.
Or maybe before that I joined an event and you were doing the breathwork. And one thing I liked about it, so like last year I was going through a lot of physical pain and like gaining a lot of weight. And I wanted to come to the community and join the workshops, yoga, breathwork, but I was always feeling like I should be a certain way, like I should be vegetarian, I should work out. But when I came to your acceptance workshop at Ottership, it was all about acceptance and accepting who I am just right now and sit down and breathe. And that's how I kind of got into it. But then I followed you on Instagram and I feel like you accepted yourself and you love yourself and you're coaching people to love themselves because whenever I see some of your posts on Instagram, it's kind of triggering, but at the same time, go and love yourself now. It sounds like this for me. So how do you do that? Like, how do you push people to accept themselves and love themselves?
I think that was an awesome way of presenting it because I think in some way, part of my radical philosophy in life is, which I don't think is that radical, but perhaps it can feel that way, is in some ways I must fully accept that I am a wretched, imperfect, flawed human being. And in light of that acceptance, only now do I feel the level of compassion and love from which I could truly transform myself into the person I'd like to be. But I can't actually transform my life meaningfully from a place of shame, resentment, or bitterness. And I know this because I was on this personal development journey very young and I didn't fundamentally change for a long time. Why? Because I fundamentally rejected myself. So in some ways, the rejection of self only left me wearing more and more masks of change, but no inner transformation. The inner transformation on a personal level came from, okay, I'm just going to have to accept that I'm fucking a little bit nerdy. I'm a little bit gay. I'm a little bit this. I'm just I'm a little bit of everything. And in light of that acceptance, the best parts of me were able to shine. And then now I really feel passionate about doing that somehow online. And, you mentioned triggering. Yeah, I, I think that humor was part of what helped me grow as a person. I found that a lot of spiritual teachers were quite humorous in their interpretation of ego and their assessment of the human condition. And I'm trying to use my own comedic lens to help people see certain patterns or perhaps less empowering ways of thinking and the ways that these thinking patterns can keep us stuck. So I use humor to try and make it like obvious, like poke a little. But the hope, honestly, and the overall intention is always, I hope that somebody can laugh about it and then go, fuck, okay, maybe I should work on that.
That's exactly like the post that you post about like relationships or codependency. Sometimes I am just like, oh my God, the girls out there are like that. Then I watch the post till the end and I'm like, that's me. So I gotta work on this. But at the same time, I think you said it the best way. The only possible way to transform is to first start to accept, okay, I have this problem. I have codependency problems. I have, this toxic styles of attachment or some of those. Something that I was struggling with was I thought everything is like from inner perspective, which is very true, but it's also important who you put yourself out there and do some of the work. So I was really wanted to stick to this spirituality label and just being inner practice and not do the work, just have opinions. And I think you kind of push people to kind of go and actually do the outside work too. Like
Thank you. What my friend calls it, he's a good friend of mine, and we were talking about it. He says, part of why you're so triggering for a lot of people in the spiritual community is he's like, you're a very grounded spirituality. And in a way that can feel very disarming, or like you're literally grounding people who are more floaty with spirituality. I think perhaps because I thought spirituality was the stupidest shit in the world. Just quite frankly. When I was a teenager, I grew up Catholic, and while I had been open to the concept of a broader divine power, leaving Catholicism behind because I found it far too dogmatic, I still I thought that spirituality was just the complete opposite of where I was headed. I thought like there's no truth to this, there's no data, there's no evidence, there's nothing empirically backed. This is just not true. I used to make fun of people who thought chakras were like a real thing. So my ascension into spirituality was very slow. And it only really came about through the use of psychedelic substances and a lot of meditation, because I was using a practice that I didn't begin using for spiritual purposes. I was using it for mental purposes, meditation. But when I began to have what felt like a radically different experience to life based on something I thought was just going to help me with my anxiety, and suddenly I'm feeling my fundamental relationship to myself like transform, I was like, okay, maybe if this practice isn't bullshit, maybe the rest of it isn't. But it's been a slow journey for me to be like, okay, the chakras, well, let's do the thing. Whoa, I feel the energy. And I'm now at the point where I'm like, oh, yes, now I'm quite possible that anything is possible. But part of what has actually transformed my life throughout this whole thing was the fact that I was putting the practices into action first. I wasn't readily accepting the idea first. It was like, weirdly, a lot of people, let's say yourself, you said, I was engaged with the idea of it. Well, maybe it wasn't putting the practice. For me, it was the opposite. I was like, man, the idea, I don't buy it. But science has shown that monks seem to be the most peaceful people. And I'm a very stressed out teenager, so I'll give it a shot. Breathing is, really important. I'll give it a shot. And the more and more I gave the actions and the practices a shot, the more I found huge transformation. And now that's why I like to, online. I don't want to sound too definitive one way or the other, but I have found some of the most spiritual people I've ever met are people who don't think of themselves as spiritual. But what they are really good at is breathing. They're really good at being present. They're really good at practicing kindness. They're really good at practicing acceptance. And I'm like, I got it. Like, it doesn't really matter what you think of yourself as if you're not doing the work that everybody talks about.
Yeah. So do you say like you're doing this for a teenager version of Nino, which is sitting on Instagram and is kind of confused and skeptical about some of these ideas? So, but when he looks at it, he's just like, okay, it's kind of parts of human experience. I don't need to put a spiritual label on.
I think that's a huge reason of why I kind of do it the way I do it, because I just know that for me, I wouldn't have been able to sell spirituality to somebody by talking too much about the spiritual philosophy of it and showing myself like, I feel like it's a caricature, but really like leaning into like the spiritual embodiment. I think that version of me, that teenager, I might have been able to get through to him quicker if I had shared the practice in a more grounded manner. If I had shared it through psychological language. In many ways, I love language. I love articulation of thought. I love reading, and I love psychology. I feel like part of my personal calling is to use my understanding of psychology and my spiritual experience to create a bridge between spirituality and the psychological understanding of the experience, of the spiritual experience. Because for many individuals, like myself as a teenager, that would be perhaps one of the only routes to get me to come into spirituality. And for me, it was. Ironically, it was studying psychology so intensely, specifically Jungian psychology, that opened me up to the idea of spirituality, because I started to see parallels between the language that like Buddhist philosophy was using and Carl Jung was using. I was like, wait a second. Collective consciousness, that's kind of like what the Buddhists say about the one mind. Like an archetype. Well, it's kind of like how somebody says like these spirits. Like, I started to see that perhaps every way, and this is actually Alan Watts talks about this, any way that we choose to talk about the world, whether through human design or astrology, we're kind of using language to help us, which are limited little monkeys, understand an ever increasingly and ever complex universe. Okay, so maybe it's that all of it is kind of true, and all of it could be true. And if you explore the practice or the philosophy, you might understand that there's perhaps even universal truth throughout them all. And that's been my personal experience. Like, oh shit, we're all talking about the same thing. We're just saying it in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened with me with human design a lot because when I got it, human design is very like lots of information, lots of numbers. And when you kind of get to know that, you kind of get human design ego. It's like, I know so much and you guys do not know much. And then when I realized that the experience and the juice and the magic of this is in its simplicity and how simple you can live and just the simple things that our grandparents were talking about, I was like, oh, I did the whole thing wrong. So like last year when I realized that, I was like, it seems like I should throw everything I know about human design in the trash because they're just a bunch of numbers and I forgot the fact that I'm a human and this is all about experience. This is all about getting dirty, doing the mistakes. What's wrong even about doing the mistakes? Because with some of these informative systems, you feel like when you get there, then you won't do any mistakes.
I've had that experience where like, oh, the moment I learn that this thing or this practice is low vibe or isn't good for the spirit, okay, then suddenly I'm now living through this new moral framework, as opposed to like what you said, being willing to get in the mud, to make the mistake, to learn from my experience. That's not to say that we can't learn from the wisdom of these frameworks or philosophies of understanding, but yeah, it can also be they can be used as a way to avoid living our lives, our very human and messy lives.
Yeah. So one thing that before we get to next question, we're going to look at your chart a little bit at the end too. And I'm going to kind of summarize what you've said in look just by looking at your chart. But you also have a podcast.
Yes.
And what was your intention like for doing this? I know that from your chart, there are a lot of dualities inside you. And that's exactly the topic of your podcast.
I think you said it perfectly. I am this individual who's a seemingly, honestly, I'm like a walking paradoxical hypocrite in the sense that I contain multitudes and there's seemingly oppositional ideas that I feel like I can just hold space for within myself. I mean, to get political, for instance, to use a topic that I know can be very controversial, but to prove my point a little bit, I think that personally, I believe that when you have an abortion, you are ending life. And I believe that. I also believe that the government shouldn't tell anybody what they can and can't do with their bodies, and that every woman, if she wants to have one, should be able to have one. I'm holding two seemingly, for some people, it's like, wait, what? How could you think it's life, but then be pro-abortion? It's like, I'm not pro-abortion. In fact, I've had to have one. It's a very difficult and sad and tumultuous thing to have to go through with another person. And I hope that I never have to do that again. But am I happy that I had the option? Yeah, yes, very much so. But that does not mean that I don't think that the weight of my action was very much I ended the possibility of life. And I did it because I did not want my life to change. There it is. That's like a great example of that's just most of my life.
Yeah.
Most of my life and most of my opinions about the world are filled with nuance, complexity. I don't approach the world black and white. And that's why my podcast is called Where's the Nuance? Because every time I've ever heard a political debate, a gender debate, whatever it is, I always just I'm kind of there sitting like, I think both of them kind of have a point. I think that everybody's making their little points and their points reflect their perspective and their perspective reflect their values. And I think we're getting caught up in a false duality of right and wrong when really it's more about, hey, this is the thing that resonates with me and I'm unique. And hey, well, this is the thing that resonates with me. I think we'd get farther as a society if we were just able to have conversations that could encourage nuance and ultimately leave the viewer, the listener, the culture going, oh, maybe it's not about creating a uniform way of existing for everybody. Maybe it's about creating a culture that holds enough compassion and space to allow for people to make different decisions based on who they are. I'm much more libertarian in that respect, or anarchist in the sense that I just think there should be more freedom to be whoever you might be in this moment in time. That's kind of what motivated the desire to do the podcast, because I felt that most of the podcasts or online spaces in general, and this honestly why I started posting online, were just very much people who have black and white thinking, who are like, eating only meat is the best way of living your life because it's the true way. Or like, only eating vegetables is the only. And I'm just like, maybe someone's microbiome might actually be better for one versus the other. And actually, for someone to ingest your content and they not have a deeper understanding of their own self, might actually lead them to get fucking sick, because they're just going to learn from an ideologue who's espousing an ideology, as opposed to actually holding the space for nuance or difference or complexity. But this has often placed me in an interesting position where I piss off people from everywhere, because that means I piss off men because I don't agree with all like the male posts. That means I piss off women because I call them out. It means I piss off leftists because I'm calling them out. And so I'm kind of like, fuck, I'm not on anyone's team. But I think it's because I'm on everyone's team. Because I don't believe that tribal thinking is going to help us evolve into the next stage of consciousness. But hey, I could see the criticism too. Like an easy way to critique this is to say, oh, well, then you're just pandering to everybody, and you're just and you're not taking a stance against things that are clearly wrong. But I would argue again that what's clearly wrong isn't that clear. I mean, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And I don't think it's as black and white as people want to make it.
It's actually beautiful that you said that, because I feel like you made peace with your masculine and feminine and this duality that exists inside you. And everyone who kind of can see that, okay, I have these parts of me and all these questions, and what if I just can have these questions? Like, sometimes we cannot choose. But I really want to say something about like being a projector right now, because you said that I'm going to trigger everyone no matter what. So you are a projector, I'm a projector, and how I see it, because of this podcast, I also go through a little bit of the chart of my guest. And I try to understand and see if I can find something that resonates with your chart, but you're open to, question everything. And that's why I invite people, because I want to tell people that you got to question this stuff. You got to go and experiment with it. You got to, get what resonates with you and do not accept what do not resonate with you. Just don't do it because people on Instagram say astrology or human design are cool.
I got you.
That's going to make you more crazy than actually spiritual. From my experience, so do not accept it. Accept it for yourself. So with projectors is like, we are here to kind of trigger people to awakening. And we are not talking about easy topics. We are not saying take the easy road. And when there is black and white, especially in very dogmatic situations, it's easy to take those roads. But projectors are coming, and we are kind of new souls, and we are coming to earth to just awaken and kind of trigger people. The problem is we should be invited. So Instagram is a very amazing space, because people can actually follow you, and people who are actually your fan or kind of accepting kind of what you're doing can take advantage from your wisdom or your guidance. But we see differently from people, because we do not have sacral energy, and we see that people are using their energy on shit. So we get really triggered. We want to tell them, hey, if you have all this energy and you're having this job that you hate, I don't have that energy and I'm doing more cool stuff than you. So if I had your energy, I would do this and this and that. So that's why projectors make up the best coaches and, psychology readers. And they love this stuff, because they see this energy and they want to direct it to the right direction. But also we trigger people for sure. And that's where we get bitter, because sometimes we go and give this guidance and someone just like is not ready and tells like, hey, it was not even your business to give me that opinion or something like that.
Been there.
Because you said that, and I was like, I don't want to jump into human design. Maybe it's like a jump from topics, but sometimes our aura itself is very triggering, because we are embodying freedom, embodying that, hey, I'm moving my body without even caring how people are looking at me. And then people will just be triggered or guided. It's based off what kind of situation are in, or this welcoming for them or not. But sometimes I realize about myself that even me existing can be triggering for someone.
You don't have to tell me twice about that. It's actually been a very recurrent and weird thing throughout my entire life where like I always had this fucking sense, even when I was a teenager, I was like, why the fuck do some people have a problem with me? Like I haven't even said anything. I haven't even done anything. I'm just being here. And again, back then it was more of like a bitter, resentful energy. But now I'm kind of like, I'm more accepting of this idea of like, I like the Instagram sentiment where it's like a light that shines really brightly to some people will feel blinding, and to others, it will feel like a guiding light. That's just like, that's the truth of who I am. And it's okay. And like, I am more and more accepting of it. I'm still human. And there's always going to be perhaps for now, there's the part of me that goes, why can't everyone just like me? Of course, like I'd like it if everyone just liked me. But also I have, I guess, the wisdom to know that the people that I've admired the most in my life are individuals who've been quite divisive themselves. Some of the individuals that I like have been called crackpots growing up, or like some of the greatest minds that I've looked up to in their own era were extremely divisive. And it's only now that they're becoming more accepted or something like that. And I think in some way I've always known that my own personal path will probably mirror the people I admire. Thus, there's the resonance in that. I know you mentioned that we don't have a defined sacral, and that's why we can see other people's energy and the way that where they're displacing it. It's interesting you say that because the way I often have described my jump into coaching was something like, well, I was always analyzing everyone's patterns and it was pissing me off just watching everyone fuck up their life. And I was so good at predicting how people would fuck up their life and or how they could change it. So I figured, why not just make a job out of that, where if you are willing to come to me and, pay me for the service, I will show you every pattern that's holding you back. And I'll show you your strength and like how you can redirect your energy into something meaningful and purposeful. But it is very much like you said, it's like it came from initially that place of like, I'm sick of this shit. I am sick of watching people ruin their lives. I got to do something. And again, that starts with me too. It was like, I'm sick of watching myself ruin my life. I got to change my life. Thus I did. And then it was like, okay, I figured my shit out. Let's go figure out, not that I'm perfect or anything, but I figured out some of my fundamental blockages. And it's been a much more ascended journey ever since.
Wow. Yeah. So one thing that you said, so we say that projectors must be recognized because we give like this triggering advices. So people should invite us, recognize us. But one thing that my human design mentor told me and worked for me, I'm not sure if it's a thing that for anyone, but it's like recognize yourself first. And that was exactly what you said. Like you said, I recognize where I am lacking energy. And then I recognize how as a collective we are, using our energy on something that is not worth it. Like always people come and tell me, oh, everyone has a job that they hate. And then I'm like, if you can do a job that you hate this good, imagine that how can you do the job that you actually love? So we as projectors, we kind of push people to kind of look at this. And for me, I started with myself because I had a lot of survival mechanism coming from Middle East as a woman. And also like, I'm not good for this. I always should take a job that survival and, safety comes first. And it was like, when I actually do something I love, I make more money. And who told me that I should have a job that I actually hate? So this is just started exactly as you said, from recognizing that, okay, I have this potential in me and people have it too. So what if we all share this and share it with each other?
I'm curious about what you said. You mentioned the reason why an individual like myself might see that with projectors is because we have an undefined sacral. What does that mean? Like, what does it mean for me to have an undefined sacral? Like, what is the sacral? What does it mean that I'm not connected to it and other people are?
Okay, that's a very good question, because in chakra system, like in Hinduism chakra system that as we know it, it doesn't mean you do not have that chakra. This is exactly the opposite of that. Everyone has this chakras, and in human design, we call it 9 centers. So we have 2 extra centers, which is one ego and one which is spleen, which is about survival. So the reason we have 9 centers and not 7 chakras is that before, when we were like living in tribes and stuff, having an ego and having kind of fear was really helpful,
Super.
because if there was a lion, fear would be a fuel for me to just run away from that lion. And now we don't need it much. So we have these two extra energy centers that we can use for good, but we are using to make ourselves getting more anxiety or something like that. So a spleen is so much related to that, and it's about immune system. And then we have ego, which you have a defined ego, which I'm gonna get to it.
Ooh.
But sacral is the biggest one, and it has been always there. Sacral is where we make babies, we create. And before that, souls were here to create buildings, internet, airplanes, so we can all go to those fancy Costa Rica retreats and act like we're spiritual, and not act like actually, internet is, if we look at it as a tool, it's helping us in awakening. So there's nothing non-spiritual about building or creation. So when someone has undefined sacral, there are projectors or reflectors, which projectors are new souls, because now we created lots of things and we don't know how to use it. Now we created all these buildings, internets and stuff, but it's like they're there, but we don't know how to manage it and how to use it. So when we have an undefined sacral, it means that we have inconsistent access to creation. It doesn't mean like me or Nino, because we are projectors, we are not creators. But if, for example, you want to, as a poem, write poems every day, you cannot. You cannot write 10 poems every day. You cannot. The creation comes to you like once in a while, and when it comes, you just catch it. That's why you know it's gold. That's why you go and tell people, hey, I want you all to really, when it's coming, it's channeling. It's not, but they will not necessarily understand that there's a magic to it. That's why we are the best thing for us to guide people or coach or be leaders in a bigger picture. But it doesn't mean you don't have sacral. It doesn't mean you are not a creator. We both created a podcast. We are like, I know a lot of artists who are big painters or creators, but we do not wake up with pumped up energy of creation. We do not want to create something necessarily. We want to trigger people. We want to awaken people. So when we have a nice sleep, when we think we did a good job in awakening people. But generators, manifestor generators who have this defined sacral, they have a nice sleep when they feel like they created something. They did something. But for us, it's more of like how I guided people. And there's a reason that we are projectors, because our aura is very outward. We are looking for the other. So we are always looking for that sacral being who we plug into and say, hey, you ready for guidance? So we are about the other. And this is one thing that I cried a lot, and I'm confessing it here for the first time. So my human design mentor said, as a projector, your question is not who am I, and it's who are you, because you are here for the other. And I hated that. When I heard that, it was like, I don't want to be about the other. Like, I just don't want to but it seems our aura just wants to focus on one person and just invite them to this new ways of living, which that's why in human design, we say in human design and astrology, there is this saying that we are going to new era, and 2025 in astrology is a very big year. And 2027 is the year that everyone will be coaching. Everyone suddenly will be psychics, and everyone will, now there's this joke going on Instagram. Do we need all these coaches? And it seems we need, because there are more souls coming. And when you look at the kids are just go around and tell their mom, I don't like what you did. They trigger their moms, and they kind of try to guide their parents, while, before that we were just like, no, we should just listen to what our parents say. So it seems like because we don't have it, we see it. It doesn't mean we don't have the chakra. We have inconsistent access to energy. So one day I'm in the creation mood, the other day I'm not.
I relate to that a lot. Yeah. Where I found that sometimes I'm very, very inspired to create poetry or writing or videos, and I'll churn out a bunch that day over 2 days. And for the next week, I just couldn't for the life of me care to or want to. And it's it feels like even to force myself to do it feels wrong. And in part, that's why I've created an ecosystem of creation in my life, from like podcast, a newsletter, poetry, a book I'm writing, online content, coaching, where I don't always have to do one thing. In a way, I'm always been like a high energy individual in general, but in a way, all these different parts of me help with a different aspect of expression. So I haven't felt like I have to create every day, because some of those things I wouldn't call creation. Like sometimes writing a newsletter isn't so much like creative as much as it is like, oh, I'm just taking information I know and just I'm putting it somewhere. I was like, I can do that. It's not too hard. Or another day with my work is, othership. I'm not making up something new every time, I'm just being present in a process that I already know how to do. But it's interesting you said that question. It really stuck out to me, where you learned from your mentor that the question projectors wonder isn't who I am, but who are you? Because that's been like the motivating force in my life and my relationships and my career, is this deep, deep fascination and curiosity for the human condition of the other, and so often I have felt like an alien who was just like, I literally, when I used to make rap music when I was younger, one of the common lines in a lot of my songs was something like, feel like ET, like something like, I feel like an alien, I feel like an extraterrestrial, and I'm just like on this planet to observe and gain, learn the knowledge and then disseminate it amongst the people so that they may help themselves. And it's again weird theme, but it's interesting that it relates to the human projector.
So actually, projectors are only 15%. So it was when the knowledge was channeled through the founder, who actually was the founder of human design. It was around 13%. So we were very rare. And then it's growing. Now it's close to 18 to 20%. So we kind of growing up, we felt that we are different because there were all these people that they were better than us at doing. And we kind of were there to be recognized for what we have to say. And not everyone wants to know that. Like, not, especially like when it's about just doing and doing, you cannot go, like, we couldn't have our own podcast when we were 12. We were just about to sit with people and compete with them and get better grades. And it's very interesting because all projectors are very good at school and they love learning and books and stuff because they love systems. And so I have a PhD, and when the question, who are you? I didn't like the question. My mentor said, imagine that person is a system. How do you feel about it? And it was like, yeah, I want to study them. And it was like, okay. Because before that, I felt like, oh my God, I always going to be about my boyfriend and not about me. And he was like, yes, that's exactly why you should take care of yourself and come out sometimes and do this recharge. And you are different. Like, you may lose yourself in that relationship because you're very addicted to that energy of them. I don't want to say lack it but we do not have access to consistent energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So you're kind of spelling that in some way, projectors or reflectors might be more likely to find themselves in codependent relationships. Is that true?
Yes.
And
sorry.
No, help me if I'm understanding this correctly. So because a projector is outward oriented, and ultimately all humans are in some way interested or fascinated by the aspect of creation, albeit we have inconsistent access to this creative power, the sacral, we can end up focusing or hyper-focusing on the other or our relationship as a means of us accessing that energy because we're not naturally getting it from ourselves.
Yes. So it's like a buffet out there. So like how the person who had the channeling raw says, projectors, when they go out, it's like they go out to a buffet and they're just choosing what to eat. So if someone offers them, they get a strawberry here. They get a strawberry and they say, I don't have like strawberry to give it back to you, but I have guidance. And then if they're really into that, then they will be surprised by the projector aura because that's different. That's something that they have not heard. But projectors are really deep. So one thing that growing up, I realized, and when I realized I'm a projector, really made sense. I was never for the conversations, like 20 people talking and I talk, and
I hate that.
I just didn't have energy to like the first question I was thinking of. Then they were at the second question, they were at the fifth question, and then I realized that's because I'm deep. I don't receive that question lightly. So the first question, when it comes to me, first of all, I do not have like energy from my sacral to like a ping pong ball to shoot it back. But also it's kind of inside me something deeper that wants to give some kind of deeper answer to it.
That's so good. My friend, I would 100% relate to that. I've never been good at like a one-on-one conversation. I'm very good at that. But like a group conversation where everyone's like chatting and throwing little things in. No, I not only dislike them, but I don't feel like I'm very good at it. And moreover, when I have good friends, thankfully, even in groups, and they'll always joke like when that stuff is happening, and then they like turn to me, they're like, "Oh boy, this guy," because immediately I'm like, "Well, and then he's like, I'm about to start like a very long-winded
Start from Egyptian.
yeah. Well, it all goes back to the first life that I became aware of. And they're like, oh, geez. Yeah, but it's true in some way. I'm like, I just can't give you a shallow answer. One of the first things I remember writing when I was in my teenage years, like they're like 15, 16, I was like, I'd rather be deep than shallow. Like, hey, look, I know I'm deep. I know that it's annoying in some way, but I would rather be this than shallow. And I think for me, there's really only one or the other. It's either I'm deep and I'm embodied in who I am, or I'm wearing a mask, which is shallow. And
Yes.
I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I just cannot. Like they say projectors should not sit, like if they go out with 20 of people in a table, they should not sit in the middle
Oh, wow.
because they're gonna get like all these questions asked shooting at them, and they just feel like very overwhelmed with all this energy that they when they wake up there was not none of it. And I don't want to sound like, this thing's going on Instagram, protect your energy, but that's almost very true for projectors because we amplify that energy in our sacral to know what that energy is to guide it.
Mm.
So if they don't invite us for guidance, we have their energy amplified, but we couldn't give the guidance back. So it's really important for us to be recognized. So
Whoa.
the who are you, it's not all about like I am about the other, but also the other should be really right because the energy should be really right.
I relate to that so much. Like I feel it in my own life. I have a great friend, mutual friend, Raja Raul, and we live in the same building. And he always makes this joke, or like he was like, "It's so weird, Nino. You're so, you're always online, or like when you're somewhere, you can be so chatty, but you never want to hang out with anyone." And I'm like, it's just I get really affected. Like he goes, "What do you mean?" I go, it's like this is how I have framed it in the past. I've been like, look, I wake up and I'm very centered in myself. I do my practice, my meditation, my workout, my little journal, and I'm like, I'm here and it's my energy and I know my energy well. When I'm out, it feels like every person I talk to, it's like I feel like I'm taking like damage points. But it's because in some way, I mean, I love the analogy there. I'm taking this energy on from them. I'm amplifying it, but because they're not actually asking for guidance, I'm just holding it now. So then by the end of a big hangout, I just have all this energy. I don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, I don't want to do that for at least another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas, his description of hanging out was so different. He felt like he was amplified by every person he talks to. I'm like, I'm not amplified. I'm amplified in some way, but it's disorienting energy for me. Whereas, again, the context, when I'm doing like a workshop or something, or when I'm literally being asked to provide guidance for a big group, then I feel energized. Then I feel like, right, yeah.
Like if there's like a situation like this, I talk. And other than that, I know like we've been together at a festival and I don't come as like a very talkative person, like at all, because I'm also like projector and I'm also like, I have like some parts in my chart that resonates with shyness or just introvert or something like that. But when I talk with someone that is actually listening to me, then I talk like my human design sessions are 1 hour and 30 minutes. And I've never had a session less than 3 hours because I just love to give for free. And this is exactly when you were saying that I was seeing these patterns in people. And then I was like, okay, I should make a life out of it and coaching. So with me about human design, it was exactly like that. I was reading my friends' charts for free. I was giving relationship advice for free to my friends. And then I was like, oh my God, this is something that should not be shared for free. And human design really helped me to understand that this is gold. Like not always doing and energy is gold. As a projector, this is my currency. This is how I should make money.
It's weird because I've had a personal inner conflict regarding the idea of like I really, really love helping and guiding. And I didn't want to monetize it for so long because I was like, well, in the perfect world, I would just do it for free and stuff. However, it became heavily apparent to me that the only thing I could do with my life was this. Otherwise, I will feel empty and like just not aligned. And obviously, if it's the only thing I can do with my life, well, then I have to make money from it, or else I'm gonna end up homeless. Because this is the world we live in. The world ain't free. The world has a cost, and that's just the nature of it. We're exchanging energy for something. But this has been an ongoing lesson for me to really understand how to build boundaries too, because I love my friends. I also have the experience that a lot of individuals in my life use me. And I don't take it personally because I truly believe in their brain, it makes sense to be asking me for all of that kind of advice. But it can just feel after a certain point where I'm like, hey man, I do charge people for this. Like at some point, like, if you want this much coaching, like you can join a coaching program. But it's an interesting thing because it's like you said, it's like it is my currency, and I'm like I really do see the value in it. And while for of course we're human and there's nuance, and sometimes of course I'm going to give my homie free coaching if he's like coming to me and asking, but it can become a thing where I've noticed people can take advantage of that, or perhaps unknowingly take advantage of that. There is a weird line and balance between recognizing, hey, I love doing this, and also, hey, this is actually, I've recognized this is so valuable that this is a job now. This is a service, and I do want an exchange. Otherwise, I'm just giving endlessly, and how can I eat otherwise?
Yes, that's very true. Also, like I remember my first reading with one of my friends. I had a very like emotional. I got it personal, like you said. You didn't take it personally, but I got that one personally because I did the reading, and she told I wanted to read. I wanted to guide. I was very excited about the knowledge about everything, and I was a projector. I wanted to put it out there, and she said, "I'm not interested in this stuff. I'm not gonna pay you." But she joined, and then before that, I while I was doing her reading, she told me that she had done her astrology reading 4 times. And when she told me that, my like I was feeling that my soul and like my cells are telling me like we are mad at you for doing this, because I felt like this person loved the systems and was still judgment about it, and I gave something that she already paid for people. I could have asked her. So she's into this stuff. She's into astrology. She's into human design. But first of all, I didn't know if I'm good enough because it was my very first readings. And also, like, not recognizing myself and not also waiting for invitation. So you want this, you want a reading, you want something like that. Okay, you gotta at least like ask about it. I should not go around, and this is exactly about promotion too. Like people tell me, oh, post about your podcast every day or something like that. But I now know how to live as a projector. Like I know that, okay, for me, it's a very different approach. I feel like projectors are the turtles who are the slower one, but somehow get to the finish line and win the race.
I felt that, I have a lot of friends in my life who are creators, many who are much bigger, let's say, in terms of their success financially or follower wise. And a lot of them have often been like, I just don't understand how, like, you're not bigger than me. Like, you make so whatever, whatever. And they're making I appreciate their comments, but I've always felt exactly what you're saying. Even from a young age, I'm like, I know that I'm going to get very far in life, whatever that means to me. But I also know that it's probably not going to happen as a very young person. Like I never, even when I was making hip hop music or when I was an actor, there was like, sure, of course, a desire to want to like get success quick, but there was always this feeling within me that actually it'll come when I'm mature enough. Like something about the idea of like, I'm here to build something that's going to last and be very, very impactful. And a building that lasts or a structure that lasts has a very solid foundation. And that's kind of what I'm building. And I've always even felt that even with like my online community where I'm like, I feel like I'm building relationships here. I feel like I'm building a level of trust that by the time I'm in my 30s and 40s, these people will truly see me or see through to like the heart, to the light, and they're not just there for a quick dopamine fix. They're there because of the perspectives that I shared. And they're, like you said, they're there for the guidance. They're there for the nuance. They're there for the coaching, whatever it is that I'm offering at that time. And yeah, I know that it's not something that can be rushed, albeit it doesn't mean I'm not impatient at times. It just means that there's both the impatience and the awareness that I'm going to have to be patient.
Yeah. So do you know the projector's theme?
No, tell me.
It's success.
Really?
So what it means is exactly when we came out of the womb, we are successful. And when I heard that, I got like, like shivers and I was just like, what do you mean? But I never had problem with actually success. Like I never thought success is very far from me.
Hmm.
And because our theme is success, so it means that when we are really relaxed and we recognize we have wisdom to share and we let people come to us who are that invite us to that, we are already successful.
I love that. You could my best friends would attest to this. They're like, you are both very insecure at times, especially with my artistry. I can be quite an insecure writer, which I always say all writers, all good artists are kind of insecure. That's part of what makes us good artists. But they're like, but you have zero doubt about like your future. And I go, yeah, yeah. Like literally since I was 5 years old, I've been like, I am going to be whatever I think I am going to be.
Yeah.
And maybe it's delusional confidence, but I'm also the youngest successful life coach that I know. I'm a 27-year-old who's worked with people in their 40s and 50s, consistently being shown that, and this is like word per word testimonial. That I'm going, yeah. When I saw your age, I thought, what the hell does this young dreadlocked hippie have to possibly teach me? But you came at a very high recommendation from someone I trust, so I said, fuck it. And well, apparently you have a lot to share. You are incredibly wise. I have learned more about myself in this process. And I've also realized it's because you weren't trying to teach me something. You were always guiding me back to my own self. And I'm like, yeah, like that's my whole philosophy is like, my personal thing isn't that I'm here to teach people how to live their lives, but rather I'm here to show people if they simply do what I've been doing. Look at yourself through these lenses and become mindful, aware, conscientious of your patterns. You will naturally become wise and more conscious because a human that is aware of something no longer operates from the place of unconsciousness. It's just logic. Once you are aware of something, truly aware of it, you no longer operate from the unconscious. That's where this is just a bit of a tangent, but a lot of people, and I know it's a bit of a marketing tactic, so no hates to the coaches whom I know who do this, but they'll be like, and I do this too, like you're too self-aware for your own good. And I go, they're not truly aware because this is where Osho's wisdom comes in. Osho says, if a human being is truly conscious of something, then they wouldn't be acting in the negative light of it. Like if a human was truly conscious of the way that their codependency was ruining their life, then they wouldn't be engaged in codependency. So when someone goes, oh, I'm so self-aware of how codependent I am. No, you're not. You think you are. You really think you are. But if you were truly aware of the way that codependency exists within your system, your life, your pattern, you would no longer operate from that place. Because true awareness lends itself to action. Mental awareness, intellectualization, that's what people have. A lot of people have a great intellectual understanding of themselves, and thus they claim, I'm so self-aware. The self is more than the mind, my dear. The self is feelings, body, intuition, mind, spirit. It's like there's so much more than just, oh, I saw a pattern and put a name to it. That's like step 1 out of 10. So, but yeah, in that sense, anyways, to go back, part of my job as a coach has always been just help people develop true awareness. And in many ways, this is something I actually was thinking of yesterday, weirdly enough, because I was thinking about what do I really want to do? Is coaching really what I want to do? And I go, yeah, it is, but I just wish it was called like I wish I had the balls to call it spiritual guidance, because that's really what I'm doing here. I'm not coaching you, whatever that field comes from. My job is to give you true spiritual guidance. And that's what I'm doing with people. I'm giving people an opportunity to look at their full self. And that comes through the spiritual lens, because the spiritual lens is, in my opinion, the container that holds everything.
Yeah.
And when you can see yourself in wholeness, naturally transformation manifests. But it's not very marketable. And unfortunately, I do have a business to run.
No, it's like, I think it's the mind that says it's not marketable.
Really? I like this. I mean, good. I want to hear that.
So, because you said, I want to share a lot of different things about different pieces that you said, but I want to first confess something. I'm not sure like if I should put it out there or not, but like when I first saw you, I had like a assumption of, okay, he's just good looking and he doesn't like have the depth or something like that. And then
Thank you. You thought I was pretty and dumb?
I was like like a typical person, like a spiritual guy. And but when I actually got to know you and the depth, then I got to know you. But if I ever want to ask you a question or even ask you for this, was because I saw that you embody that. Like, for example, when you go somewhere and you're climbing a tree and you're not caring about what people think, and then I see that, okay, this person is healthy, and then I don't care. Like, I just want to know what you did that you have a healthy body that you, now, and you're also out of this, ego situation that you can have a little bit of alone time and take yourself out of all this surface level, maybe sometimes conversation, and just have a little bit of recharge. So this is how I see it. And someone told me sometimes teach what you're learning. And I'm not saying like you're learning it, but this is how I choose my coaches or people who I really want to do the work with, because I'm like, I want to know what they're doing, because I see that they're doing the work themselves still day by day, every day. So this is how I see it. There's nothing like kind of marketing thing or anything. Like, I think the biggest marketing is you, like people who actually do want to have a session with you. This is how I feel. I'm not sure about others, but if I like when I asked you like for more guidance for coming here, this is because I see that, okay, you are doing the work, and I want to know what your magic is, why, how you're more embodied, how you're more healthy, how you're, and it's funny because you are also an embodiment coach. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I appreciate that. I think I can definitely get caught up in my own mind, especially when the, the difficulty is my business I have run not independently, but with business mentors, with people whom are not me. And, they always have their own systems, their own formulas. And, they're always like, okay, well, like, who's the person you're trying to speak to? I'm like, I don't know, like fucking anyone who resonates. They're like, no, but we need people who have this amount of money and this and who fit this domain. So it ends up being this co-creation. But I'm in the process of a whole rebranding right now, in the back end with a good friend of mine, Theo from Falcon and Flower, an incredible branding agency. And what we're getting at is kind of what you're touching at, which is like, dude, because he said this, he said, man, people want to work with you because you're fucking, there's no one like you. You're like, what I mean? You're kind of like a sexy cult leader who's like cool and chill. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be a cult leader, but I think I get where you're going with this. He goes, no, it's just, you're a unique character. And you should just, like, that's what's going to attract people to you and to want to work with you. So one of the words or terms that we're coming up with that, like, we want my brand to be associated with, goes is grounded spirituality. Because he goes, ultimately, you are very grounded. When people meet you, you can be very, like, three-dimensional. You can be very, like, 3D world. Like, whatever you want to talk about, I can meet you there. I don't always need to be, like, talking about the ether and spirit. Like, it's not me. However, I'm fundamentally living my life through a very spiritual lens and through embodied spiritual philosophy. Most of the way I approach relationships, relating, career, personal value is all from, honestly, spiritual gurus who I like fell in love with. And then I like integrated what they taught in my own little like lens, through my own personal perspective. But it's ultimately a very, and again, I don't like using this word as a differentiator, but it's a very spiritual approach to living while being very grounded in my day-to-day actions.
Yeah.
And I hope that what you're saying is right, because that's what we're going to lean on a little bit. Like, hey, man, fuck it. Like, people are opening up more to these words. The words aren't so triggering. And perhaps my bias of the past, which was something like, and this was my bias, sorry to all the hippies, but was like, the only people who like the word spirituality are hippies, and they certainly don't have money to pay for coaching. That's my bias. But I'm realizing that's not really true, because a lot of the people I've ended up working with are professionals. They're engineers. They have full jobs, but they also happen to have spiritual inclinations. They're open to it. And exactly why they're working with me is because they said, well, you seem to be very embodied in your spirituality in a way that firstly makes sense to them because it's not too woo-woo. Like you're clearly healthy, intelligent, a business. You have your life in order, and they want to see that. People want to see that from someone who's going to guide them. Then they say, but secondly, it's the fact that you are so spiritual or whatever. So I've been learning as of recent that perhaps the very thing that I fear, which is to be I don't know, judged for my own embodiment of spirituality. It is the mind. I get stuck in there too. I'm not perfect. Jesus.
I think one thing, when I joined the spiritual community, especially in Toronto,
Uh-huh.
I also had a very big judgment about the word coach itself, because first of all, I thought I knew it all. Let me put it out there.
Me too.
I was coming from science background. I started my spiritual journey when I was 12. I started meditating when I was 12, and it was like, I know it all. What these people gonna help me with? But then I got to positions that I stopped taking care of my body and I gained weight, and it was like, this is a process. It comes back to you and it goes. And then I needed a person who can help me. And then I saw that, okay, I can help people, and I see it as helping and just helping each other as a collective. And it sounded very natural or beautiful. And then it was not like, okay, I'm bigger than you if I'm your coach. And basically, my mentors became my friends, like became people who I kind of joined their community and ended up in finding me more communities here because I didn't have like many friends here. So I kind of had all those judgments over these words and stuff. But it's interesting that you mentioned we also have a job or anything. So I want to jump and say a little bit more about your chart, because one of the things that you have a defined ego.
A defined ego, she says.
So, like, this is a very specific one. Not many people have it. It's about why I should be a hippie, and like hippie as in like there's some good in protecting your ego too. So sometimes being selfish means self-love. And it doesn't mean like you have ego, but when you have a defined ego, if you're very embodied, when you're really healthy, you may come up as this guy who is like wearing a lot of clothes or like taking care of himself so much, or like this is skincare and that way of presenting yourself that in a spiritual community, it can be too much. So I've seen like people who have defined ego somehow, again, I'm sorry to say it, but somehow triggering people. It doesn't mean that you have toxic ego, but it means part of your mission is to tell people these two can exist together. Like, we don't need to be broke to be spiritual. And when I saw that, I was like, that actually makes sense. Because I don't know if I should say that, but if someone does ice bath, then suddenly people judge them as like fancy or something like that. But this is part of your mission. And I understand that in spiritual community, we say, oh, like we should be really hippies. But this is part of your mission. And I think you are embodying it in a way. But I understand that you may get a lot of, not hate, but like, is he really spiritual by doing all this fancy stuff?
I love that. I mean, this is perfect. In some way, what I said earlier, the feeling that I'm here to be a bridge between worlds, between understanding. It's like, yeah, but the bridge has to, in some way, have a defined ego, like a role or identity that's other people can relate to, but then be embodied in the practices of spirituality and stuff. So it's my whole being literally acts as a potential bridge for people on one end to perhaps come a little bit to the other end. But you're right, though, because I mean, I forget who said that, but they were like, yeah, it's weird because, when I first met you, I think they meant because you work at Othership and stuff. I wasn't sure if you were like really into like spirituality, but like you're really like embodied, man. And I was like, that's so funny. Hey, you spiritual people are so quick to judge, huh? So quick to do. Well, I guess my job is at a fancy place. Like, yeah. But I get it though. I think that probably comes from the reality that there's a lot of individuals who are, what are they called? Opportunists. And they see a growing trend in anything in markets. And then they take advantage of those growing trends to make a buck.
Yeah.
So then they wonder, like, oh, is that what I'm doing? Am I seeing a growing market in spirituality and then just trying to mooch off of it? But I will say that would be the last place that I would go to if I was just drawn by money, for the record.
Yeah, no, it's not about the money, but like, for example, I know some of my friends who have the defined ego, and they're in the spiritual community, and they talk about it, that why I should not have a nice car. Like, they literally tell me like, why I should not have a nice car, and that would be like, I'm not spiritual, and sometimes like why I should, if I can afford a good like staying in a hotel, why I should go, for example. Like they have these concerns and I can see that, okay, where it's coming from. But in your coaching style, I would say like it's kind of like just pushing people to sometimes put themselves first,
100%.
put themselves first and like appreciating their egos, because sometimes self-love starts from being selfish and just put yourself first and then start it that way. And I definitely can see that in people who are doing coaching with a defined ego.
I 100%. I mean, one of the defining characteristics of the coaching program I designed called the Divine You Coaching Program is that I always tell people, and like even on their first clarity call, sales call, really, I say, this is not a program for you to become Nino. Nino is Nino, and he's very happy with himself. But he's happy with himself because he is living through his own values, because he's fundamentally built a relationship with himself where he loves himself. That's what we're doing for you. We're going to investigate the concept of who you think you are. We're going to identify what your inner values are. Then those are going to act as your core compass. And then our whole journey together is to see how we can move your life into true alignment, into true service of yourself. How can we serve yourself at the highest level? And then for the nature of my program, that means live a life where your actions, your thoughts, and feelings are aligned with your values so that you can then fully show up in the world however you want to show up. But that's fundamentally like selfish, right? It's like, I know you're worried about the world and global warming, but let's stop and go right back to you, because I don't believe that the world can become anywhere near a utopia if we're all fundamentally in a poor relationship with ourselves. But if I can encourage people to cultivate a meaningful and deep relationship with themselves, ego included, wow, then we have a true chance of healing.
Yeah.
I have found that a lot of people whom are very spiritual in many ways, like very able to transcend ego, don't know how to actually sit with their ego. Like they can't exist comfortably with their little monkey mind. Like I can see my little monkey mind and it's funny. Like, he concerns with how they look. Oh, haha, like always caring about, it's funny. I can see it and I don't have hate for it. I see it as like what you said. It's a natural part of evolutionary consciousness. It evolved for a purpose during tribal matters. Why? Because it was important for us to belong to the tribe. Because if you didn't feel a sense of identity with the tribe, or you would have died. You wouldn't have survived. So I see it with like, oh, it's a part of me. It's a part of my past as a human. Is it what I want to guide my life? Absolutely not. I want to be guided by something a lot better than that thing, or, more advanced, let's say. But I am not. I believe that wholeness, which is what I think is, in my opinion, the highest level of spirituality, a true integrated wholeness, integrates everything, fully holds space and or acknowledgement and love for all parts of us. So in loving our ego, not shaming ourselves or bypassing it or denying it, are we truly at a point of ascension? But I think the ascension comes when I go, oh, that thing? Yeah, I love that part of me. It served a purpose. I'm not gonna listen to it 24/7, but I see it. And also, especially when it comes to our own life story, I see how that part of me was trying to keep me safe. And yeah, it led me to make a lot of mistakes, but it was acting out of survival and safety. And when you can hold your mistakes in the light of compassion like that, wow, are you free from your past? That's acceptance. But it's really hard to move forward when you're looking at your past with like shame and like, fuck, that was my ego, my fucking evil ego. Like, that's not exactly a mental landscape that's going to create a solid foundation for you to build a big, great life of yours. That's a life with a foundation in shame.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to work.
That's so true. Like we shame ourselves when we fail and we shame ourselves when we success.
Oh, yeah.
It's like at least like growing up, I felt like in a culture like Middle Eastern that there's so much pain. If I am successful, I should shame, right? I should stick to my victim mentality. And I think healthy ego, not the ego as we know it, that I'm better than everyone, but the healthy ego helped me kind of separate myself from my community a little bit and see that how much I'm addicted to that victim mentality, how much I'm addicted to say, I'm a woman, I'm a Middle Eastern woman, and I'm going to stick to that. Now I'm in a free country, how much my mind is actually wants to stick to that. Then when I worked with it, it was like, oh, I have shame in success too. I have shame to be successful. My ego says, like my unhealthy ego says, if you become successful, you make so much enemies. but this is the how ego wants to protect itself. But when you get successful, what if you actually meet more aligned people on the way? And I think people who have defined ego have this natural access, and ego physically is very related to your heart. So it's so much about love. It's so much about I love myself and I can show you how to love yourself too. And yes, of course, it can get toxic ego too. But when you have defined ego, usually when we read someone's chart, we say, this is something that may come triggering for people. But if you are really embodied and healthy and you know your body is where your heart is actually functioning correctly, it's going to show you what a healthy ego is. It's not afraid of success. A healthy ego is not afraid of, it's not going to shame you if you fail or become successful.
I love that topic of like recognizing that we not only hold fear regarding failure, but so many of us hold fear regarding success. It's actually a recurrent theme with individuals I work with that a lot of people feel guilt in striving. They feel like it's unfair of them to gain anything in the world. There's a guilt mentality. You called it a victim mentality. It's actually something that dates far back as in Friedrich Nietzsche in his book, Beyond Good and Evil, The Genealogy of Morality, I think it's called. He actually talks about this. He calls it the slave morality. He says that based on the Judeo-Christian ethics, that it essentially created a moral structure whereby it is the one who admits, like, I'm sinful, I'm wrongful. Like, that's the good way of being. So for us, we're inherently in this Judeo-Christian framework anyways, in this philosophy, we are struck with this mental strife of both being, of actually feeling guilty whenever we're doing well. And in a weird way, we're applauding ourselves when we feel bad because it's like, yes, that's because technically you're such a sinful little being that you shouldn't want a lot and you shouldn't do a lot. And you should, and this is the morality that we've inherited. It's like a slave morality. And in that book, he then offers a solution, which is the Übermensch. It's to adopt a more individual framework for morality, which in some way, I really appreciated that book. Now, of course, it has its own, it's old-timey and maybe not always poignant, but it raises some great points, which I really adopted. I read the book when I was 16. I read it again at 18. And it was around that time when I started to reflect on my own relationship to my own victim mentality and be like, whoa, it's weird. This is this part of me that feels like strengthened by thinking of myself weakly. Where the hell did that come from? Like that doesn't seem healthy. And then learning to adopt what has been a slow process of really building an independent moral framework that doesn't have to prescribe to dogma, to religious ideals, to Puritanism, or even to New Age spiritual idealism and Puritanism, which is very prevalent, nowadays in the spiritual community. Like you mentioned, oh, you bought a nice car, you must not really be spiritual. It's like, I'm sorry? Or like, oh, you don't dress the way we do, must not be spiritual. There's another pervading sense where a new dogma is forcing individuals or encouraging individuals to strip themselves of individual expression, individual morality for this broader thing. Nuance. Of course, I also believe in some kind of universal ethics regarding non-harm. The least amount of suffering you contribute to is probably for the best. But I also believe that there's nuance regarding what that means each of our individual lives should look like. Like I mentioned earlier, for some of us, maybe the ethics of harm really does extend to all animals. And for that individual, they cannot imagine eating an animal. For someone like me, who's just a wretched human being, I quite enjoy my animals. And I really don't fundamentally have an issue with partaking in the cycle of death and life with an animal and partaking in the consumption of their flesh, because I don't demonize death. And I think it's actually a perverting of death when we think of death as this horrible thing to do to another thing. I mean, it's horrible when you end a life extremely early, like a human's, but I also think that some animals, it's like, okay. I don't think that there's this moral ethical framework that's inherent in the universe that's permeating itself through space and time. And if you're an actor who does aka eat meat, suddenly you have gone against the universal framework for good and bad, versus if you're the individual who ate the vegetable, now you have aligned yourself with the goodness of the universe. I just go, if that were true, I don't think the universe would have all this suffering, rampant murder, and why nature would be one of the most violent things that you could possibly witness. Nature, as a natural process of God's creation, is the most violent, incestual, murderous thing I have ever witnessed. I sometimes lend myself to the belief that God is something so beyond our concept that if we truly were to understand the ethics of God, it would frighten us. It would terrify us to know that God loves everything. We say it sometimes, that God is the lover of everything. And I go, extend that thought logically, my friend. You think God loves everything? Well, what is everything? No, not just the good thing. I mean, everything. That's the kind of God that I believe exists and that you do too. I think we all get to it. But that's a God that ought to frighten us a little bit. Like, whoa, that God loves war? Sure, yeah, it loves that. That God loves murder? Yeah, sure does. That doesn't mean that God is encouraging you to do it. It just means that God is the thing that we can never understand, is an energy or source of all eternal love. It loves all of it. And that is a radical proposition for most of us, who, rightfully so, are human beings who exist within human worlds with human ethics and human morality. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that trying to attach your human morality to some kind of godly, predetermined morality is foolish, because if you were to truly continue the exploration of what God's ethics are, you might find that their ethics terrify us.
Wow, goosebumps. So how is my relationship with that God would be like? I would be terrified. But then I expect God to accept all my layers. Like if I do the same thing that people who I judge them that they do this stuff, if I do the same thing, then I expect my God to approve of that.
No, it's beautifully said, because that's exactly what we're getting at, right? In some way, let's take the story of Jesus Christ, irrespective of what we think of the individual. That is a story of the embodiment of God personified. Well, that embodiment of God personified forgave murderers, rapists, whores, everything. He was just loving them, spending time with them, holding their hands, telling them they are loved beyond measure, that he forgives them, that his Father God would forgive them. It's radical. It's a radical proposition. It's a biblical story. I'm not educated enough in the Bible to identify it, but there's a passage whereby one of his disciples is frustrated that Christ gives help or compassion to somebody who's clearly a bad person, bad person. And Christ is like, oh, you don't understand. You haven't heard me at all then. You haven't been listening to a word I've been saying. Because it is, in fact, all of them, especially the wretched one, who's the most rightful to enter the gates of heaven.
Yeah.
And, this is actually the story of the prodigal son in some ways. I'll quickly share it if anyone's unfamiliar, but I'm also simplifying it. But there are two sons who belong to a rich father, right? And there's one son who's always been good. He's always been at his dad's side, doing whatever the dad wants of him. The other one's been a problem child, never listening, always doing his own thing. And then he goes off to go on his own. And he leaves the father at home to go on his own adventures. Bye, Dad. While the other good son stays at home, never leaving his dad's side. He's a bit of a suck up. And then the other son comes back and he's broke. He's lost all of his money. And he's like, Dad, I fucked up, man. And his dad goes, no worries, son. In fact, we're gonna slaughter the big calf. We're gonna throw a celebration because the prodigal son has returned. And the other son is furious. Like, what the fuck? You're throwing him this big party? He was a degenerate. He blew all his money. He's been living poorly. And then the father goes, but he came back. But he's back. What do you mean? Like, I'm celebrating that he's here. The story apparently has two layers. One, firstly, is the idea that it is the one who's willing to fall, who's willing to step outside of the thinking pattern of the father, aka who was just a follower the whole time. But you were willing to step outside of following. Sure, you got lost and you fell, but you'd be caught by God, because God's grace not only loves people, everyone, especially those who are wicked and wretched and sinful, but God celebrates it, because for you to fall and then come back to the path, wow, that's meaningful. God, or the Father, sure, loves the Son that always stays, but in a way, God wants us to step off the beaten path, even if that means making mistakes, because as long as we come back to the Father, we will be received with all the love. And it's an affirmation or reaffirms this very Christian idea, but I think it's universal in most things, that the essence of God really is this all-loving, all-forgiving Father who just wants us to come back to him. Like, hey, just come back. I'm super happy to have you back. And if you leave me and you come back, even bigger party. Like, and I'm trying really hard, honestly, and it's to live like this in my own life. It's not easy. I'm a human being. Like I teach my clients, I have my own personal set of values, which I think are important for me. And it can be easy for me as a human to judge others who seem to have poor values in comparison. But the recent embodied idea that ever since ayahuasca has been very, very present in everyday moments of my life is that, oh man, when I'm speaking to you, when I'm speaking to anyone, this is just my belief and embodiment. Oh, I'm just talking to myself. Not in a selfish way. I don't mean you're Esteban Nino Palacio, but I mean, that's me. That's that same one eternal soul here and now. Oof, and it lets me be patient. It lets me be way more compassionate. It allows me to be more understanding, because ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, it means that the moment outside of time that I was them, I made the exact same choices that they're making right now.
Oh my God, that one is like, the older you get, you're like, I don't want it to be like my parents. What's happening? The
I'm curious,
scary one.
what has been the hardest part of navigating, like, expanding your consciousness while also recognizing the relationship you had with your parents?
So I was into science and rules, and I'm going to predict my future. And my parents are about mistakes. Like, they've done a lot of mistakes. They've gone out of their way. Like, culturally, like, my mom is 9 years older than my dad, in a culture that women get married when they are 18 years old with a guy. Like, with my dad, they wanted to get married, and they're from two different branches of religion, which was very, at the time that they got married, very, not good somehow. And they made a lot of risks. Like, there are people who, in terms of financial or in terms of like relationship, they separated a lot. There's still like, they don't know what they're doing. Like, they separate a lot. And I was like, I want a foundation, and I'm not going to move from this box. And that's how it's going to bring me safety. And I went exactly the opposite. Like, since I realized that, okay, I'm an adult right now, I just got messy. I just did all the mistakes that I was judging them for doing. I lost a lot of money. Like, I did the same risks. And I felt like, okay, this is life. What is it about? And I dated people who were very different from me, because I was always telling my parents that you two are very different. Like, how you guys can even do that? And I dated people who were exactly different than me. And then with human design, now I know why, because we say usually you are attracted to someone who has a different gene, or they're very different than you. So the more feminine you are, you're attracted to more masculine. So the more masculine, and that's the beauty of a relationship. But when a man and a woman can only understand each other from the heart, which we say this is the pull in human design, that it's keeping masculinity and femininity together, dating people who were very different than me. And yeah, I did the same exact mistakes, and I went through a lot of, breakups and bonds being broken and coming back. And because I was like, I'm gonna make a right choice and the right guy. And if a guy does this, like, I would judge my mom that if a guy does that, I won't stay in a relationship. But I did stay in some relationships because I love the person. So when I'm judging someone, I come back, and if it's jealousy, I check it what I really want, that I'm jealous of that person. So what do they have that I want that too? Or what kind of insecurities I have that this is triggering for me? So
I think that's powerful. I mean, there's a saying that true judgment is simply a fear of something you don't understand. Because when we're curious about something, judgment no longer exists.
yeah.
Because you either understand, and through the understanding you have compassion, judgment dissolves, or you don't understand and you're curious and you're motivated to learn more, or you judge because you don't understand, and the judgment makes it easy for us as humans to put it somewhere, right? And I actually see judgment as probably part of that survival instinct from the ego in some ways, because we needed to make quick judgments all the fucking time when we were living back in those tribal societies. It's funny that human design talks about this. This is also really big in evolutionary psychology. It's called the mismatch hypothesis. that our brains or minds evolved for environments, well, hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's really when the modern human mind came to be. But over the last 10,000, 2,000 years, we have so radically different environments, societies, cultures that we are living with these primitive minds in these new worlds. Part of my extension to this hypothesis is that that is why we're being asked to spiritually evolve, because the biological evolution won't happen fast enough, but our spirits are not bound by the same constraints that our biology is. And neither is consciousness as a result, because they're interlinked. And thus why we are at a time where our consciousness needs to evolve to match the rate of the increased technology, which is again what you touched on earlier, that why there's people like myself, projectors, because the world already did it. It got the internet, it got electricity, and we have all the means to create a utopia. We have it all. But why isn't it happening? Well, because we're not evolved enough. Okay, so what's happening? Well, nature, evolution, God is actively and willfully creating more people like me, like us, to awaken more people. Why? Because it's part of what it does. You know, if some ways you could make it very biological. You could kill the whole spiritual component of this thought and go, we are like this organism that's interlinked to it. These individual organisms that are linked to the collective, and we're always trying to evolve. Well, we evolved very intelligently, and we created these big tools. But now these tools pose a danger to us. So now we have to evolve new thinking. So then now individuals with different brains and new ways of thinking are operating, because the larger organism is trying to accommodate for the fact that, oh shit, we made them very, very smart and really good at building things. We made them terrible at empathy, compassion, understanding, and saying, okay, fuck, now we got to develop that. And it's this kind of, I always put it under the umbrella of, this is just the progression of consciousness. It's the development of consciousness.
Okay, it's very interesting. It shows how aware you are and how embodied you are, because this is exactly where I wanted to kind of say about your chart. So basically, this is how you said we were animals. We were all about intuition. I'm in the bushes and I hear something. I gotta run fast. So that's the spleen. We came from spleen to mind. We happened to be then sacral. So we started to be like intellectual and also doing. And now we are in emotional awareness. It means that I'm sitting in an office. It doesn't matter if I'm the smart person. It matters how much compassion do I have for my colleagues, who has a calmer nervous system, who can, in a very hard situation, control their anger when there is a new thing happening, new situation happening for the company. Even in an office situation, I'm not even talking about relationships or parents, and you are an emotional authority person. So you have a defined solar plexus. Solar plexus is all about emotions and says why we villainize emotions. This is awareness. And years and years and years before, emotions were not awareness. Emotions has nothing to do being aware or wise. Emotions meant weakness. Imagine like my dad couldn't cry. Like in my culture, like my grandpa, if he would cry, they would be like emotional man, hide your tears. And now suddenly we are moving to an era that emotional authority beings, which are the solar plex defined people like you, are becoming people who are aware, because they're aware of people's emotions. And it's funny because before we start that, I was like, should we share this? And you said, I'm a poem. Of course I'm emotional, but it's still we shame if we cry. It's still we feel, is it okay that I'm sad right now? Is it okay that I'm angry right now? But what my anger wants to tell me, what my jealousy wants to tell me.
So you say, because I have a defined solar plexus, I'm an emotional being. I know, yeah, you mentioned before we started recording, you're like, yeah, you actually, I don't know if you want to share this, but you're very emotional. And I said, of course I'm emotional. I'm a poet. Like, it's true though. I was I was on Tumblr as a 14-year-old boy, like with all the other teenage girls. There was me on there going like, I feel you ladies. I was having the first time I got broken up with and my heart was shattered, I wrote a book. I wrote 28 pages of a book I'll probably never finish about the relationship, just to process my emotions. Like, this is the nature of my existence. And you're right though, in some way, what once felt like a burden, like I often felt very burdened by my emotions. Now I'm like, fuck yeah, I understand my emotions and I can sit with them. And I don't think there's any strength in being somebody who represses your emotions anymore. Because like you're saying, I agree. I think this is a new era where not only authenticity is one of the highest currencies, but emotional attunement is probably one of the most powerful things anyone and everyone ought to develop, because our emotions are messengers. And you said that so well. It's always revealing something. I teach my clients something often. I go, anger is a secondary emotion. You don't just get angry for no reason. In fact, even like if you think of it from a biological standpoint, let's say you were scared because there was an animal in front of you, you fear. Well, it wouldn't help if you just stayed in the fear. So you might then start feeling angry, and because you're preparing to fight something, and you need that anger to give you the energy, the adrenaline to get you into warrior mode. That's always anger. Anger is telling you that something else is maybe, triggering your survival instinct, your fear, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe a sadness, a grief. There's something there. But yeah, emotional attunement is such a powerful thing that we can and ought to develop. And it comes really, right, I think, from basic shit. It's not rocket science. It's just like, sit with yourself and feel the emotion and write it down. I feel this. And then the more that we do that, we create an ecosystem and a mind that just goes, oh, I get it. Like I'm really aware of all of my emotions as they move through me. But it can be difficult when you're an emotional person. And so far as like, people are like, how are you? And I go, answering that question would take me the whole day. So I'm going to say a lot of things very live. Life is full. Because it's like, how am I? Well, let me tell you, I'm still feeling the grief from my cousin who killed himself 2 years ago, moving through that. There was a last year's heartbreak still coming up. It's like, I'm always feeling things. I am feeling things all the time. But I'm pretty good at it.
That's where your power is. So, for example, I have a complete open solar plex and you have a defined. The difference is you are on all these emotional waves. But the difference between you and me is that I'm very avoidant and ignorant of that. So the different would be like something like if you go to relationship, you may, if you are not aware and you're high on these emotions, you may say, I love you. And then the next day you're on the low and you're like, oh my God, what I did. But for me, it's like if someone tells me I love you, I run away. And because I'm avoidant, I don't have any access to why emotions are important, why they matter. Like I'm still learning. That's why it's open solar plexus. But for you, it's like you know it, but it's like a wave. It's like imagine like you're on a boat and you are just like, and you're like sometimes on very high and sometimes on very low. And for you, you said it the best way. Sitting with it, journaling, it's not easy, but that's the best way because we don't want to act on our emotions. Like even me, who has an open solar plex, like
I think it was a philosophy I really loved growing up, and I know some people make fun of it, but Stoicism was really powerful for me because in my early 20s, I was doing all this work, and I was like, wow, I'm so emotional. Like, what the fuck do I do about that? And then it was like, well, you don't have to run from it. You can feel it, but there is a way of operating that doesn't have to come from emotion. It's, again, very nuanced, but like, hold space for your emotions, listen to them, reflect on them, but operate not from them. Operate from a place of, and this is why I teach my clients, your values.
yeah,
Because if I have a value system that is relatively stable, and then I create habits or actions or goals connected to my values, even though day to day I might have this boat rocking of emotions, I can always come back and be like, well, wait. Tomorrow I might feel different, but what do I know is not going to change? My core values are probably not going to change.
yeah.
So I can probably still feel very fulfilled and purposeful by making sure that I'm attending to the things that are aligned with my values, even if today my emotion regarding that relationship is different or that practice is different. Because if I'm always extrinsically motivated by my emotions, someone like me, that's fucked, because my emotions aren't always going to be motivating me to do the thing. But if I can connect my habits or goals to an intrinsic motivation deriving from a connection to my values, then I'm a lot more likely to be the disciplined person that I have become. I know you once said this to me, you're like, oh, like, I'm surprised you're a projector, but you seem to be disciplined and do a lot. I think in part it really is this application that I have learned a method to connect my action to an awareness that supersedes my emotions. because I know my emotions can be so all over the place. For me, I know it's probably not a good idea if I'm connect the things that I probably have to do every day for me, like meditate, movement, journal,
Mhm.
to my emotional world.
How do you know your chart?
I
I was supposed to like help you with this. Now you are like so embodied and you know it all, but that's amazing. So
hear that.
so you said it the best way because like solar plex is an awareness center, but also a motor.
Mm.
So it can push you to do things. When you are on emotional wave and you want to say I love you to someone, you wake up, you dress up, you take shower, you go to their house and you remember the old days, you throw stone and say, I love you. Like you sing with the guitars. It's a it has energy. So
All my exes would be like, yeah, that's definitely this guy.
so what I'm trying to say is it's a very weird energy center. Like it's not about doing and creating, but it can push you to write a poem. There is energy to, but it's about also like not making crazy decisions.
You know what? That's crazy. It's earlier you mentioned you were talking about poetry, and you said it's very likely that you wouldn't be able to just write 10 poems a day if you just set that as a goal. If you're just like, I'm going to write 10 poems a day, and like you try to approach that from a creation point. But you touched on how because I have an emotional or the solar plexus place very defined, that if I had an emotional motivation to write a poem or could connect with that, I could. And I thought, well, that's very interesting because honestly, I can write a poem every day, but it's not from, like you said, I don't do it from a place of like, I'm going to write a poem, but it's more like I sit there with my journal and I just start to feel like my life. And because I'm almost always going through something, whether that's like just the weight of the grief of my life or the emerging loves or the disintegrating love. There's always something in my heart, in my emotion, or my solar plexus, rather. And from that place, I feel very motivated to create often. But you are right. It doesn't come from any mechanistic part of myself. Like, I'm going to write a poem every day. Like, no, if I set that as a goal, it won't happen. It can only happen if I am in tune with my emotions and I allow my emotion to flow through me.
Honestly, for me, my open solar plex is my biggest challenge because I am very avoidant. Like when I have a fight with my exes, I'm just like, I cannot talk.
Mm.
But when someone have emotional awareness, they believe that having those tough conversations, yes, we cry, but we fix it together. But I am very bad at this. And this is one of my shadows in terms of my chart that I should work on. Let me like put it this way because it will be good for a comparison. So you can tell people that dealing with your emotions is beautiful. Talking about it is beautiful. Write a poem about it if you don't want to go and throw the stone like on that girl's house, you know. But sitting with it is beautiful. So for someone, for me, like who I have open, when I should not get conditioned by how you deal with because how Nino deals with his emotions is different from how I deal. But I can learn some. I can learn. Okay, I can take this from you and take from some other person. But when you have it defined, it's just like you're all on these waves. It's a bless and a curse at the same time. But the most important thing is to not make big decisions. Like if I am suddenly now I'm in love to move to a different country for, because this is very high and then it will become low. And there's a reason we call it solar plex. You don't need to resonate with that, but it's very much affected by solar energy too. So it's like it's not about your ex or your parents or me sitting here and you're going through my emotions and understanding my emotions, which is then your power in coaching because you can see that person's emotion. But it's also about what planets are going through. So you may wake up one day and you're just like, I am just emotional today. I don't know what just happened. I'm just on this emotional wave. So you want to take your time, but also have a fun ride, and people judge emotions while solar plex is 4 times stronger than something like intuition that is very trendy right now. Like now everyone is talking about intuition, which is very important. So my power is my intuition. Your power is your emotional authority. So I have a very big intuition, like an animal. Like I'm basically an animal. Like I can go around and I'm just like, that doesn't smell right. But for you, it's like your emotional authority. emotional authority is 4 times stronger than animal instincts.
Wow.
So we thought we are better than animals because we are smarter, but we are better than animals because we are better in emotions.
Wow.
And that's people get it wrong. That's how people get the whole thing wrong.
And it's weird though, because so much of what we've been taught in this culture, especially as men, but I'm sure even as women too, that there's it happens to a degree, is just your emotions are not something that you should listen to. Like they need to be controlled, stamped out, and always be happy. And again, the nuance being like something like, well, actually, when I create the mental container that gives permission for all of myself to be, I generally feel far happier on average. But I'm also feeling quite a lot deeper, all of the range of emotions. You know, I know that for myself, anyways, the journey of life has ironically not been like, oh, wow, now that I'm older and I claim I can better regulate my emotions, I suddenly feel less grief or sadness. No, no, no. I just feel them when they come up. What I used to do is I would immediately block it, immediately suppress it, immediately numb it through drugs or alcohol. So then it would be they wouldn't be coming out normally. Sure, it'd be like a little bit here, a little bit there, getting angry at somebody. It's like projection, anger, projecting. And I just thought like, see, I'm not that emotional. I'm just, that's just, life is just bullshit or whatever. But now it's like, oh, I'm so emotional, but life is great. Like I feel so much. I feel so deeply and intensely, but these experiences aren't actually taking away from my experience of presence, but they're enhancing it. It's only in admitting that I'm truly sad that I can be with my sadness, as opposed to denying it. And then suddenly I'm actually dissociated and living life in a dissociated state. The dissociated state is far worse than a sad state.
Yeah. Yeah, you're living your truth. And I'm actually very grateful for you sharing all this. Like, I sometimes don't know how much people want to really share about their chart and how much they resonate, but I'm truly grateful. Thanks for your honesty and just being here and trying to be open, especially with emotions and stuff. And I think people who have the same chart as you or not, they can actually learn a lot from it. Because when I started this, I was like, the information is out there and there are thousands and better people than me, I believe, generally, that especially the person who had this all channeling that can talk about the knowledge and educational way of it. But I want my friends to come and say, hey, I do not resonate with this at all, or I do resonate with this, or this is how I actually feel. And thanks for being here. It means a lot to me, like that you actually share some parts of you that you may feel vulnerable to share for, a new community or public, but I'm truly grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. Honestly, one of my personal philosophies and beliefs for myself, maybe not for the world, but is I'm here to bear my naked soul to help others get naked too.
That's a good.
And as much as I'm not a perfect person, I practice what I fucking preach. So when I say that, I don't just say it. Like,
No.
I truly, whether it's getting online and being like, hey, I feel really uncomfortable about the fact that I have a cold sore right now. Here it is. Whether it's like literally training myself to willingly confront moments of discomfort for myself, or whether that's like, of course I'm going to be like vulnerable here. And like, man, like, and like very truthfully, like I'm so emotional that like I'm still sad about a relationship that ended 2.5 years ago. And I think about her all the time. And when I feel about her, I've had many relationships in between. And it's not this idea of like, oh, so you're still holding on. Like, no, I'm very present. I'm just extremely emotional. And there's nothing I can do about it. Like, and I've kind of accepted I'm an emotional person. I'm going to feel emotions. Might as well make use of it. And that's why I make art. That's why I write poetry. That's why I write things. That's why I go online and make a video. Because I'm stuck with the person I am for now, whatever this person is. And I know and I've intuited, but I'm happy that you've shared with me the kind of like knowledge of why I have this defined solar plexus and my emotions are running wild. But I acknowledge it and I can do something about it by making art, writing something, and just trying to be a better person too, because part of those emotions is like, I feel a lot of guilt when I've made a mistake. I feel a lot of grief when I've lost people. And all those emotions ultimately also help me, what I believe, become a better person, It's only under the weight of the emotional grief or resonance of my mistakes that I'm able to change my behavior into the future.
Yes, that's very true. And also, you give other people's permission to do the same. I think it was inspiring for me to just like, I was like, oh, I can maybe write a poem too, or this is how it works. I think you did your job. You did your magic on me.
Kudos. And you've done your magic on me. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And if you want to share anything about the works that you're offering or upcoming works,
It's my moment to plug.
yes, it's your moment to.
No, I mean, the only plug I'll put is ultimately like, I don't believe that anybody needs anything. And I mean this kind of radically. Like, you don't need a coach, you don't need a therapist, you don't need a psychiatrist, you don't need anything. What you need is to turn inwards. This process, of course, is fundamentally one of the most complex and difficult things you might ever do. And as such, it can be very helpful to have a guide, a therapist, a coach, a friend, a mirror, whatever people want to call themselves. But this is really a journey. Like, life's ultimate wisdom and the golden eggs that await you are not in the next relationship. They don't lie in that next career. They lie in a deep curiosity unto yourself. And I would encourage anybody who's on that journey, one way, shape, or form, to try to be so compassionately curious about themselves. Compassionate curiosity unto yourself and unto your life will take you farther than any shame or hardened discipline ever will. But if you can be radically transparent with yourself, radically honest through the lens of compassionate curiosity, and then build a life filled with habits that you approach through a discipline as opposed to emotional motivation. If you can do those things, like what I've said, you're that's it. You've figured it out. It actually is so funny. This woman I'm seeing or was seeing, she said, she was being a joke. She was asking me these kind of questions. She goes, "Wow, you've really figured life out, huh?" And I laughed. I said, "Look, I mean, no, insofar as life is a perpetual mystery, but I think that accepting life isn't a problem to figure out is the peace, has given me the peace that so many people think is going to come from figuring it out." That's the paradox. Like, I have fully accepted life is a mystery beyond my understanding, like the existence of it all. But I don't have to be.
Yeah.
Like, sure, life is going to be a mystery, but we don't have to be mysteries to ourselves. Well, okay, how do we approach that? Well, just get curious about yourself. And if you do that, you'll find all the gold and all the light that you ever needed.
Yeah.
That's my plug.
I love that. I know that I cannot figure everything out. And I was very much into this position of figuring everything out. But I can sit with myself. I can have a coffee with myself. I can have a nice tea with myself. That doesn't mean I need to figure myself out completely. But it's all about just enjoying myself. And I think I'm kind of saying goodbye to my mind that wanted to know it all, but this is how it goes.
And the interesting, beautiful paradox, and in letting go of the mind that needs to know it all, we really feel like, oh, we know it all. Because what is all, if not just the presence of what is? And if when I'm present with what is, without the chattering mind, I've truly known it all. The paradox, right? It really is. That's it.
Yeah, that's like what you feel after meditation. You're like, oh,
Peace.
peace.
Knowingness.
That was it. Was it all?
That's awesome.
Anyways, thank you. You didn't use the promotion much, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. I work as a coach. You can find me online, Esteban Nino. I'll be traveling for the next 6 months, and I'll be making content and still taking clients. The work I do is work for anybody who ever thinks, maybe if I just sit down on a call with him a few times, I'll change my life. Don't ever work with me. Working with me requires you to do work, and I can hold you accountable. I can guide you through a process. I can be that mirror and mystic for you. But please don't ever work with me if you think that it's going to be really easy or that I'm going to solve your life problems for you. That's not how it works.
Yes, it's a big no, but it's gonna be fun because I've been there and I know it. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for listening. And we're going to go eat something probably. And love you all.
Amen. Love you. Bye.